Well, I appreciate the elaborate explanation of this 104-page, 50-some-odd section document. But since there wasn't a lot of meat to the explanation of what's in the bill, I think we should ask some questions about it. I guess the first thing I would focus on is the process that brought us here. And I'm delighted that I have the opportunity to engage with Senator Duff this evening in our Q&A. But I would just, out of the gate, ask, out of curiosity, where the chairman of the Housing Committee is. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, as we know, we had a government shutdown and the President of the United States decided to curtail some of our travel throughout this nation, and so some people could not get to and from places easily. So that's the answer to that question.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate the response. I take it that that means that Senator Marks is tied up somewhere far enough to be missing a plane ride. I just would like to also correct the good minority or majority leader that it wasn't President Trump that shut down the government, but that's a whole separate conversation we shouldn't get into at the moment. Let's talk about the process for the bill itself. There was a lot out of the gate yesterday morning made of the fact that this bill was emergency certified and that it was given to the House members with only a short bit of notice in its current form. And I'm just curious how and why that would happen. I guess I will just ask this as a more direct question, which is, why are we having this bill via an emergency certified bill at an emergency session? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, again, the bill, original 5002 was vetoed. We had worked with the governor and his staff earnestly with the House to put together a bill that would receive the support of the governor. And I think many of us would argue that housing and the lack of housing in the state of Connecticut, some would argue that we're over 100,000 units short of where we need to be, is emergency enough to make sure that we can grow our economy and we can have housing for the people of the state of Connecticut.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate that. But we have a lot of policy matters that come before the legislature, each legislative session, including House Bill 5002, which the gentleman has referred to several times. But that went through the proper legislative process. It received a public hearing, and it was voted on, frankly, at the very last minute. And also, if I recall, with a very little preparation for the minority, because the actual bill document was presented at the last minute. But this is a little bit different. I mean, we've had a situation where you had a bill 5002 almost complete, and it's coming to us now via an emergency session, and yet the final document wasn't given to the House members until just before they voted. And I guess the reason why I'm asking these questions is because I think it's super important for people to understand that the process is important, that we must, honor the fact that we are a deliberative body, that the policy that we make should come from the legitimate interaction of lawmakers who have the proper documents in front of them, the proper context, the ability to interact with the people that are impacted and affected via public hearing and so forth. And clearly that didn't happen. Maybe I'll ask this question. How long is a public hearing good for? Because I'm quite certain, after I heard yesterday in the House debate, that some of the sections in this bill, maybe even a majority of them, did receive a public hearing at some point in the past. How long is a public hearing actually good for? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. In our joint rules, I don't think there's an expiration date on public hearing testimony or information.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and I appreciate the answer. For me, that's a valuable question, because I've argued for a long time that I believe that we ought to have public hearings for any content that comes up that is new before this legislature. And for me, our legislative cycle ends at CNADA. When that happens, that is the end. The game starts over, and that for anything that comes up in the future, we're starting from scratch. It doesn't seem like that's the case, though. I believe the majority believes that they have the ability to put whatever they want before this legislative body, and regardless of whether it's actually received a public hearing or not, they're going to move forward with it, regardless of the objections of those in the minority. And I just wanted to be on the record about that. Maybe we can move on to the substance of the bill. I guess the first question I would ask is, what is this bill really about? What is the goal? I noticed that the title changed. The former title under 5002 was an act concerning housing and the needs of homeless persons. And this bill is largely the same, but this one is called an act concerning housing growth. I'm curious to know what this bill proposes to solve through you.
Thank you, Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. I think I said it in my very short remarks in the beginning that this is about building housing and alleviating the affordable housing crisis that we have in the state of Connecticut that impacts not only our state, but housing across the country.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President, and I appreciate that there is an opinion by some that there is a housing shortage, although I don't know that that is documented. Is there anything that you can provide me that shows that we're actually short housing units through you?
Thank you, Senator Duff.
I believe there's been reports, absolutely. It's also empirical. I think both of us are in the real estate industry as well. We understand that there's a shortage and there is a lack of inventory, and that there has been, any time units have come up for sale or for rent, there's always more demand than there is supply. So it's pretty easy to recognize. And again, this is not just a Connecticut issue. This is an issue around the country, and dare I say around the world. I've heard many different places that I've traveled that talk about a housing shortage in other states. This is why you see other states across the nation, both Democratic and Republican legislators and governors who have tackled this issue. And because they all recognize, I guess maybe some do, but most of us, some don't, but most of us do recognize that this is an urgent issue, and is it the peak of the affordability pyramid of trying to make our communities and our state a more affordable place. And the first step of that is housing where people are not paying more than 30% of their income into housing.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Sampson.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate that answer. And it is true. I think we are both happen to be real estate salespersons in the state of Connecticut. And I certainly have a lot of experience dealing with folks that are looking to buy or sell homes, or dealing with rentals, either as landlords or tenants. I'm curious if the good majority leader knows how many rental units are currently available for rent in the state of Connecticut through you.
Thank you, Senator Duff.
I don't know.
Senator Sampson.
I would encourage any folks that are listening to this to just kind of Google on over to Realtor.com and put a quick search in there. Just put in Connecticut apartments for rent. I think what you're going to find is that the amount of available rentals in the state of Connecticut is more than 2,000. When I did this last night, the number was 2,416. And of course, that is not all of the rental units that are available in the state of Connecticut. Those are just the ones that happen to appear on that one Realtor website, which effectively is mostly listings that are actually being entered into the multiple listing service by real estate agents. The fact is that there are countless more available rental units than that. So given that there's 2,400 available rental units available currently right now, and I think that some are even sub $1,000 rental units, I'm curious to know why the good gentleman seems to think that there is a lack of supply through you.
Thank you, Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. I have yet to see a sub $1,000 rental, maybe in my area, Fairfield County. I'm not sure about the rest of the state, but my understanding is that rentals are at a record high number across the state and across this country because of supply and demand issues. All I know is that when we have new apartment buildings open up in the city of Norwalk, as they do in the city of Stamford, and I would say probably in Bridgeport as well, and other places that I've seen, they fill up very quickly. with a very high premium. We see landlords across, especially in our big apartment buildings, when tenants renew their leases, that the rents go up $400, $500, $600, maybe even more. That's not because there's a lot of supply out there. That's because there's a little supply, and it doesn't meet the demand that's out there.
Thank you,
Thank you, Madam
Senator
President.
Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and I appreciate that answer, except we seem to go back and forth between a couple of different topics. A moment ago, it was about supply, and now it seems to be about cost. So which is it, through you, Madam President? Is it simply that there are not available homes or apartments for rent, or that those homes and apartments for rent are too expensive, through you?
Thank you, Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm not really sure I understand the questioning, because I think it's both. I think you can have a lack of supply and a high cost because you have a lack of supply. I'm just not really understanding the question or the point, but I'm trying to answer the questions the best I can as however you're asking them to me.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. Let me just put it this way. I'm a regular person, and I live in the state of Connecticut, and I have to purchase goods and services every day, just like everyone in this room and the people that are listening, and things are expensive. There's no question about it. I know my electric bill is expensive. I know that my groceries are expensive. I know that gasoline's expensive. I know that everything that I'm faced with as a cost is expensive. I get that. And I'm certainly not happy about it. In fact, I come here every day working to try and prevent costs from rising. In my experience, it's government that has a large impact on the cost of things. Certainly in Connecticut, the cost of electric rates created by policies that the government is responsible for. So when we're talking about whether or not things are expensive, that is a fact. There's no question. I will not dispute that with my counterpart in this debate. The question is, what's actually driving the cost of all of these things, whether it is groceries or electric bills or the available of rental property? The question is, what policies, what outside forces have driven up the cost of housing, and will the bill that is before us have any impact on that for the good? And I'm not seeing that, and that's what I'm trying to get at. But the first step was to actually nail down what we're talking about. And the good majority leader came out telling me that growth, that's the title of the bill, is important. We need more housing. And my assistant here has just shared with me that there are currently 207 apartments for rent just in the city of Norwalk. And I agree. I mean, looking at these, I mean, they range in the low for 1,600. I think there's one. There's a couple here. Most of them are over $2,000. That's expensive. There's no question about it. And it's a lot more than it might have been 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And the question is, what in this bill is going to lower the price of those rentals, assuming that there is no shortage? If we can show that there's 2,500, in fact, we just saw Realtor.com showed over 5,000 available houses and apartments for rent in the state of Connecticut. That tells me there's no shortage of availability, just that the price is high. What in this bill is going to make the difference to lower the price for the person on the street? Through you.
Thank you, Madam President. I think we agree on the sense of there are issues that do make things more expensive. I would argue that local zoning makes housing more expensive, because when zoning is used as a tool to not build, that makes housing in communities more expensive. We also have national policies that make electricity or groceries more expensive, such as tariffs. That has made issues more expensive, unlike what the promises were to bring things down on day one. So yes, there are factors where policies do drive up costs and make things more expensive, but the issue here in this bill, and what will help, in my opinion, is tools in which to build more housing. So whether it's housing growth plans, whether it is a state housing authority, whether it's putting those dollars behind that, it's whether it's holding towns accountable to build housing. All those things, I believe, will help to increase supply, which will hopefully bring down prices.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I genuinely appreciate the answer from the majority leader. I guess I would just say that we haven't been able to get very far in our conversation, in our debate, because we can't seem to agree on the basic premises that are involved in our conversation. You know, you just went back to saying that it's a supply problem, but I've illustrated, citing evidence, that there's not a supply problem. We can also talk about census data. You know, if we look at the amount of people that reside in the state of Connecticut, the number has not increased dramatically for 20 years. In fact, I think we may have the lowest actual figure of increase of population in the entire country. The only inbound immigration we have into the state of Connecticut is international. And I don't know how many of those are lawful or unlawful immigrants, but most of the people that are Americans are actually leaving Connecticut to go to other places. And I suspect that's because of the policies being passed by this majority that are making Connecticut a very difficult and expensive place to live, including the cost of housing. Because I would argue that the policies that are being passed by the majority have already led to high housing prices. And we're certainly going to talk about it tonight. But I would like for us just now to be able to agree on a couple of things. If we could get to where we agree, maybe we can actually have a substantive debate to how to solve the problem. But I haven't seen anything from the proponents of the bill, who in my mind are the ones responsible to make their case. I'm here to be able to ask questions, to either agree, to believe it on its face, or to question the facts that are put in front of me. Now, I haven't seen a single thing that says that we have a massive increase in population or that we have a substantial shortage of housing. I've seen just the opposite. So I'll ask a final time. Is there something you can show me that says that we actually have a substantial shortage of housing? Through you.
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I think I've answered that question multiple times, and that we're just not going to agree. Because again, if this were just a Connecticut problem, this would just be a Connecticut problem. But we see this issue across this nation about a housing crisis and a housing affordability issue. All you have to do is look at the Eco Northeast study that shows the affordable housing gap and what it takes for somebody to be able to afford to live someplace using the normal metrics of around 30% of their income to afford a place to live. People are now spending 40, 50, 60% of their income. You can say all the stats you want about the city of Norwalk, about 200 rentals or whatever the number is, but I can tell you as somebody who lives there that those numbers paint an inaccurate picture in the sense of what the demand is for that housing, and why we need to have this bill to work on and hopefully build more housing. So we're just going to disagree. That's okay. But you can keep asking me the same question. I'm going to keep giving you the same answer. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. And I can certainly appreciate the desire of the proponent of the bill to agree to disagree, but I'm not trying to agree to disagree. I'm trying to ascertain objective facts. I cited evidence. I pointed to Realtor.com, which is a nationally known, well-respected source for available property listings, and they show upwards of thousands of available rental listings in the state of Connecticut. If the gentleman's response to that is that that's not true, that I'm making it up, then fine. And I guess we will have to agree to disagree. But I would like the people watching this right now to go to Realtor.com and look up apartment listings. And if you want, tomorrow morning, call somebody on one of those listings and see if they actually exist. I bet they do. I do real estate for a living. That's how I actually afford to be able to come up here and do this job and fight for the constituents that I represent. And fight I do every day to make sure that they are living in a state that preserves their freedoms and liberties and hopefully can be made more affordable in the future. And for me, it's very difficult to stand here and ask these questions when the notion is that because I'm somehow questioning the positive attributes that are supposedly in this bill that are going to reduce the cost of housing, that somehow I'm against lower housing costs. Nothing could be farther from the truth. I want our housing costs to actually go down. But that doesn't mean passing a bill that just magically makes it happen. I want to know how this bill makes it happen, and so far I haven't heard that. We can't even agree on the fundamental premise that there is not a housing shortage. What we have is inflation. And inflation is rampant in this country for lots of reasons. Mostly the government, the federal government, the state government, local government to a smaller degree, usually in response to mandates put upon them by state government. But inflation is the thing that is driving up housing costs and the costs of everything else in our society. And that's just a reality. I wish it wasn't so. I wish that we had policies to counteract that inflation, to help people afford things. But the expansion of government, the increase in taxation, the Biden administration printing literally billions, maybe trillions of dollars during the pandemic did not help. That did not help our inflation problem. And everything that's happened since hasn't, whether good or bad policy, hasn't impacted prices in a way that has lowered them. And in fact, I don't know that that's actually possible. Historically, inflation is a trend that goes up. How much is the question, whether it is a relatively small amount year after year or a very large amount year after year. And because of that, I don't know that we're ever going to see $800 apartments for rent in Waterbury, for example, which is something that I used to see all the time 10 years ago, but certainly doesn't exist today. And again, I have a little bit of an issue with trying to hold a carrot out there for folks somehow that this state government and this bill is going to be the answer, and that suddenly somehow people are going to be able to have really cheap rents if we just pass this bill. Much like everything else we did today, I would like to put a stake in the ground and say, let's come back 5 years from now after this bill is law, because it will no doubt pass. And we'll see. We'll see. I want to hear from people to tell me that I'm wrong a year from now when rents go down. I want them to come to me. I want them to pick up my house when it happens, to tell me how wrong I am that when rents go down. This bill is not going to make rents go down. All it can do, effectively, is change the landscape of Connecticut, and not for the better. And that's really what this debate is about. I think that Governor Lamont got that message during the regular session, and that's why he vetoed this bill, because so many people, let's face it, planning and zoning is not exactly the hottest topic to talk about for politics or anything. The only exception to that might be my good friend, Senator Gordon, who just loves to talk about planning and zoning. The fact of the matter is, it's hard to get people interested in politics at all, but talking about planning and zoning is like a topic that most people is akin to paint drying, and getting them interested in it is hard. But nonetheless, you had an uprising across this state that was so significant that it pushed back similar legislation for the last several years, and last session it pushed it off right to the final night of session. And in fact, I believe at the time that the bill 5002 was passed, I don't think that there was any mistaking the fact that it was already destined to be vetoed by the governor. So it's a miracle to me that we're back. The only thing that says that this bill is back before us is simply because there was a positive result for the majority in the most recent election, and they feel like now is the time to move this overreaching piece of government growing legislation that will have zero positive impact on the renters in the state of Connecticut, but will benefit certain parties for sure. So one of the things that has been shared by the majority in the last couple of weeks is that this is somehow a bipartisan piece of legislation. But I noticed the House voted yesterday, and not a single Republican vote was cast in favor of it. And I don't want to speak on behalf of my Republican colleagues up here, but I don't think that's going to happen here either. So where is the supposed bipartisanship that led to this revised document through you?
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, before I respond to that, two quick things. One is to answer the gentleman's question from an article from Realtor.com, since that was cited already. It says there's a headline that says Connecticut is failing in affordability and in home building. So I would say that headline speaks volumes from the organization of realtors and where we are as a state. Secondly, I take exception of questioning my motives and the motives of the majority when it comes to doing this bill and how the election came out on November the 4th. And I would ask that we not question our motives during this debate. If we want to debate policy, that's fine. We may agree, we may disagree, but I would hope that we would not be debating motives, Madam President. And if you can ask your question again, please.
Senator Sampson.
Am I being asked to repeat my question?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. I asked, since the House vote yesterday did not include a single Republican vote in the affirmative, and I doubt that will also, that any Republican senators will vote for this bill. And again, it's premature. We're still going to have this debate. People's minds can be changed. But I'm just curious, what is the sense that allows the majority to refer to this bill as bipartisan?
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. I can't speak for anybody else. I never labeled it as bipartisan. I believe that there was a bipartisan mix of mayors at the governor's press conference last Friday, including the mayor of Stratford, maybe other Republicans as well. I don't know. And maybe hope springs eternal.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I just was curious about that because it was mentioned several times last night by folks in the majority, and even in the gentleman's opening remarks, he said that a lot more people have come on board since the previous bill. And I'm just, for me, I think that's a marketing effort rather than reality. The bill is largely the same. The largest changes that I've noticed really have to do with the way the fair share portion of the bill is implemented. And I just want to make sure I understand this correct. I mean, effectively what we're doing is, instead of having OPM determine exactly what is going to be required of towns to establish new mechanisms to create more quote-unquote affordable housing, what's going to happen is you're going to have OPM partner with the councils of governments across the state to have them make rules that OPM will ultimately approve or not. Am I correct about that through you?
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. The change from the last bill to this is the housing growth that municipalities or COGs are supposed to come up with the numbers. The governor's talked a lot about towns take the lead. That has been his mantra over the summer and into the fall. And so that is the difference. And they will work to come up with numbers on their housing growth.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. How do towns take the lead when it is actually the towns that are going to be limited in their ability to make their own decision-making? Through you.
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't understand the question because I don't agree with that characterization of the bill.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I just trying to follow the previous response that I got, which was that this housing proposal follows the governor's desire that towns take the lead. I think that's what was said, and I'm just curious how that happens, because this bill essentially is a change in the way housing is built. Currently, it is approved by local elected officials that serve in town government on their planning and zoning boards. That's who makes this decision now. that people in that community that live there, that have to experience the policies that are enacted in their town, get to elect their neighbors to make decisions about what buildings go where based on the rules that they've established. That's the current system, and this is designed to override that system and effectively give the state government, through this mechanism, the power to override that local control of zoning. Please stop me if I'm getting anything wrong here, through you.
Thank you, Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I did not hear the entire response, but again, municipalities are responsible for coming up with a housing growth plan, with the COGS or separately. That's all.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I don't know that the answer had anything to do with my question, and we've done this a few times now where I've asked a question and then it was not heard, not answered. I've been asked to repeat it, and I'm fine doing that, but I do want to ask these questions because they're very important to the very many people that are watching this right now and have been participants in this debate over this and similar policies over the last 5 years. I think we owe it to them to have an actual proper discussion about what the motivation is of the proponents is here. And I'm trying to understand how taking local control of zoning away from the actual elected representatives of the residents of the town is not advantageous, and why we would suddenly decide after decades of following home rule and local control that suddenly there is a new and better way to do decision making about where homes are placed and built. And I just want to hear it from the proponents. Why is this new way better? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. I would hope that the Senator would not insinuate that I am not answering his questions or evading answers. I'm trying to answer the questions as I hear them the best I possibly can. I've asked you one time to repeat and another time to that I said I did not hear you. That is not doing it over and over again. So I have worked my best to answer your questions as directly, succinctly as possible, as the best I understand them. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
All right, thank you, Madam President. Let's try it this way instead. Let's just ask who currently determines whether or not a building project occurs in any particular town in Connecticut. Through you,
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. I assume every town has its own process, but ultimately it would be planning and zoning.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
and this bill changes that process, if I'm correct. I'd like to know how it changes that process. Through you.
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. It doesn't change the process. It just provides a housing growth plan for communities, and they have to submit a housing growth plan. Does it change planning and zoning, the process itself? No.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate the answer. Is the gentleman suggesting that the local planning and zoning department of each town across Connecticut still would have the same authority to deny the placement of a proposed building that they do today? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Then can I ask a follow-up question, which is, if that's the case, then what is the purpose of OPM and the Council of Governments' involvement? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. I will repeat the answer I've given a number of times now, which is the housing growth plan that provides a number for communities as a growth plan for building housing, which would then provide potentially additional school construction money or additional money for sewers or other things that are used as a carrot to build more housing.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the gentleman mentioning the carrot, but assuming a town does not file a housing growth plan, is the town jeopardizing benefits or money they might receive from the state? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Duff.
If they don't do a housing growth plan, then they don't have access to that funding that I just articulated.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Well, the reason why I'm asking these questions is because I'm trying to get to the bottom of how this all works. For me, what has been described is what I would refer to as a very coercive mandate. We are not actually leaving the decision-making up to the towns, as was stated. There is a strong suggestion made to the towns that you must comply with what the state government via OPM through their partners, the Council of Governments, has decided for them. And if they fail to do so, they risk losing funding. To me, that seems rather coercive to me, and not as was described, which is that planning and zoning still has the ultimate decision. Am I incorrect in that through you?
Thank you, Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm trying to understand the question. Nothing has changed with planning and zoning, if that was the question.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I guess that, the question and answer route was the way I wanted to approach this bill, because I thought that it might be the most illuminating way for people that are listening to get a sense of where the parties stand on this type of housing policy, whether or not state control of planning and zoning had advantages that the majority was willing to defend. But instead, since I heard no actual description from the proponents about what this bill does, they were happy to just put the bill on the floor for an up or down vote without any actual description for the people of Connecticut or for the minority. And because, frankly, me asking questions about the bill is like pulling teeth. I'm really just on a fact-finding mission, and I really am not trying to insinuate or otherwise upset the majority leader in any way, shape, or form. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of what the bill does and why they believe it's the answer for the state of Connecticut. But I'm not getting anywhere. So let me just start talking about the bill, and maybe I will get back to asking some questions in a few minutes. What's happening here is that towns are losing their autonomy. Right now, every community in the state of Connecticut, 169 towns, elects people to their local planning and zoning boards, and they are responsible to the people that voted for them, just like each of us in this circle are responsible to the people that voted for us. And when we screw up and we vote for bad things, we should be expecting to be voted out of office. And people that serve on local boards and commissions in town have the same thing. In fact, they probably got it worse, because they're actually representing their neighbors that might live across the street or next to them. That is the system that works so well in our country. Our country is founded on this really, really simple principle that we would have bottom-up government, where people, individuals, have the most rights and the most power to govern their own lives, and that decisions that would be made for them by governments would be done as locally as possible. So the decisions about their communities are made on a community level, and then on a state level, and then the federal government would have big decisions to make, but only on things that affect faraway things like the national security, etc. That was the vision. Bottom-up government, individuals with the most rights. Slowly but surely, that is all being turned on its head. And this right here, this bill that is before us, is just another cog, excuse the pun, in the mechanism that is allowing that to flip on its head and create central planning, localized authoritarian power that governs and dictates the lives of individual citizens, and in this case, towns, to maintain their individual identity. That is what is at stake here. That is why people across this state are up in arms. That is why organizations have been formed, have raised tons of money, have done loads of advertising, have bought billboards and advertising saying that this bill concerns them, because effectively they realize that they are going to lose what their town actually is. As I was saying, local planning and zoning officials are responsible to their neighbors. And their neighbors really do truly understand what the town's makeup looks like and whether or not they want to allow a certain type of construction in a certain place because of the character of that town. And yes, there are people that oppose that ability for towns to do that because they have their own view that those towns shouldn't be able to govern themselves, that they should be told and dictated to as to how they should make up their towns. And that's what this fight is about. But what I wanted to understand during the conversation was why the majority feels that it's better to replace people that are actually in the town, elected by their neighbors and responsible to them, with people that are far away. Frankly, it's not even people that are far away, it's OPM, which is the Office of Policy and Management, which is the administration. They're going to decide everything. There's some language in this bill about the Council of Governments and everything else, but that's phony baloney, hocus pocus. That's what that is. Because they don't really have any power. If you start researching it, you realize that it's OPM that creates the COGS, determines the boundaries of the COGS, sets up the rules for how COGS exist in every way, shape, and form, and that these COGS will maybe have something to say about establishing the beginnings of what they feel the plan is, but ultimately it's up to OPM to decide whether it's legit or not. So the COGS don't have any real power, and contrary to the majority leader's comments, the local planning and zoning department loses its power entirely. I don't know why you wouldn't just acknowledge that. That's the point of the bill. That is the point of this bill. Deprive local communities of their ability to make their own decisions regarding zoning. And in my view, it's based on this false premise that somehow we have a housing shortage. Let me tell you what's actually going on. The state of Connecticut has become an undesirable place to live for many people, frankly. I still love the state. It's my home. I'm never leaving here. I'm going to fight every day to make it the state that I grew up in, that is a beautiful place to live. I could go on for hours about all of the advantages of Connecticut. But I also, if I'm being honest, have to weigh all of the things I love about Connecticut with, frankly, its state government and how that state government makes it very difficult for somebody like me to reside here. And most of that is based on affordability, but some of it has to do with civil liberties too, because I don't have the same rights in this state that I might have in another state, because they've been taken away by a government that feels like they have the right to dictate how I'm supposed to live. What is going to happen here is we're going to debate this bill, and there is no doubt in my mind that it's going to pass. It passed the House yesterday. The majority, and I will repeat this, is feeling their oats. You know, they just had a very successful election in the municipal races last, I guess a little over a week ago now. And they're looking at it like we have the ability to do this. I guess that the people that disagree with us don't have as much say or influence as we thought they might, and we're going to run this bill anyway. I am begging the people listening and watching this to not let that happen again. You have got to take your concern to the ballot box. You have got to make sure people understand that this legislation is not what you want. You've got to make this legislative body and the House of Representatives understand that this is unacceptable to you, that you want your local towns to maintain their ability to govern themselves and decide what your community looks like. Because I'll tell you, this is only going to get worse, not better, until there is some sort of reaction from Mr. and Mrs. Connecticut, who I'm afraid are sleeping. I don't want to insult my own constituents. I really don't. But if you care about what this state looks like, you've got to care at least as much as me and a lot of other people do who are willing to fight for it. There's a ton of things in this bill. I really want to talk about the parking mandate for a second. There's something in this bill basically that tells towns that they can't even do common sense things anymore. Like towns have rules. They say, look, if you're going to put up an apartment building, we would like you to at least have a certain number of parking spaces for that apartment building, because if you don't have enough parking spaces, that creates other problems. There'll be too much on-street parking. The traffic will be affected. Safety, we might not be able to get a police car or a fire truck in there. These are common sense things. And guess what this bill does? This bill tells towns, forget it. Your rules don't matter. We're going to set the rule for you. I was asked to confirm a question, so I do want to ask a question of the good majority leader through you.
Please proceed.
Through you, Madam President, there were several different variations of this bill shared over the last week or so, and there's some confusion about Section 13, and I am curious to have a specific answer on whether or not this bill requires 16 units or 16 parking spaces. I'm sorry. It's parking spaces based on units, whether this affects apartment buildings with 16 units or more, or less than 16 units. Through you.
Senator Rahman.
Thank you, Madam President. What was the question? Can you repeat again? Through you, Madam President.
I'm asking how many units an apartment building has before they are required to abide by the requirements of this bill as far as minimum and maximum parking.
Senator Rahman.
Through you, Madam President. Madam President, the last bill was 24 units, and this bill 8002 is we're down to 16 units or less.
Thank you. Senator Sampson.
So buildings, including buildings with 16 units. It's not less than 16 units, it's 16 units or less.
Senator Rahman.
That's right.
Senator Sampson.
Very good, thank you. Can I ask another question? Are towns required to accept the developer's parking study, even if their local planning and zoning has their own data that contradicts it through you?
Senator Rahman.
So, Madam President, let me explain comprehensive this 16 units and what they mean. Is a town, if they want, they can deny the applications for builders not to build anything if they think public safety and public health issue there.
Thank you. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Let me ask a different question. Does this apply only to new construction buildings, or could this be applied to an existing structure or an established apartment building through you?
Senator Rahman.
Through you, Madam President, can you repeat the question and what section you referred to?
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam President. I am in Section 13 of the bill, which I think the good gentleman is aware has to do with the requirements for parking having to do with apartment buildings of certain sizes, and we've established that this bill now reflects 16 units and lower, but now I'm just asking how it actually works. I'm curious to know whether or not the town has the ability to refute the developer's parking study. I'm asking whether or not this affects existing buildings as well as newly constructed buildings. I'd like to know who's liable when there's parking shortages. Anything you can tell me about this would be very helpful, because this, to me, is a significant change in how towns are going to have to manage the construction of larger buildings that develop a lot of vehicles along with them. And the town's going to have to manage the traffic and parking concerns through you. Thank
you, Senator Rahman.
As far as I know, through you, Madam President, if it's less than 16 unit, if developer apply, like I mentioned earlier, town can refuse the permit if they see the public health and public safety issues. But if developer can walk away, but if they want, developer can, ask for the study, parking studies, and developer have to pay for that.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I didn't hear the entirety of the answer. The important thing that I was asking about really is about whether this affects existing structures. Was that answer provided? If not, can I have it again through you?
Senator Rahman.
Through you, Madam President, doesn't affect existing,
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Very good. So this is only going to impact new construction. It will not impact existing properties. That is very good to know. I also know that there is a section in this bill, I think several of them that have to do with as-of-right commercial conversions. And I'm just curious, how far does this policy go? What right does the town have to say no, given a legitimate reason for opposition, like whether or not such a conversion conflicts with its master plan? Does this mean that almost any kind of commercial property could be made as of right residential, like a garage or a grocery store, through you?
Senator Rahman.
Thank you, Madam President. This is summary review and must be met all the public safety and public health requirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you. So was that just public safety and public health? Was environmental addressed as a potential concern that might give the town the ability to refute such a as-of-right conversion through you?
Senator Rahman.
Through you, Madam President, it's a must met all the requirement. Thank you.
Senator Sampson.
I'm sorry, could the gentleman repeat that?
Senator Rahman.
Must met the requirement, public safety, public health, and yeah.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much. So I guess my answer is that environmental concerns are not something that would give the town the authority to refute an as-of-right conversion. Am I correct about that through you?
Senator Rahman.
Madam President, if this town thinks there is a public safety and public health issue, environmental is the part of the public health. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson.
I'm sorry, I got to ask him to repeat one more time.
Senator Rahman.
Environmental is the part of the public health issue.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Is that somewhere in the bill that the environmental concerns would fall under public health, or is that somewhere else in our statutes? Because I didn't see it in the bill, and I was looking explicitly for that through you.
Senator Rahman.
It's without saying, Madam President, through you, public health is any kind of environmental or anything involved with the public health. This is the public health issue.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Okay. I will take the gentleman's word for it, although I would love to see how it plays out in practice. Again, I've already put a stake in the ground that says we're going to come back and we're going to talk about how this has worked out in the future. One of the things I really wanted to have a conversation with, and I was hoping to have that conversation with the good chairman of this committee, which I know she is extremely passionate about this policy, or with the majority leader, and I'll offer that option if he'd like to come back to the conversation, but I'll ask the good Senator Chairman of the Planning and Development Committee about the definition of affordable. We started having this debate about supply, but we never really even got to finish the conversation about what's affordable or what's not. But in the policy in this bill, the definition of affordable says 80% of the area median income for 40 years. And I was just throwing around some numbers, and for most of the state of Connecticut, that dollar amount ends up well north of $2,000. Does the majority believe that $2,000 a month or more is a reasonable rent through you? Or better yet, would it be classified as affordable through you?
Thank you, Senator Rahman.
I yield to Senator Dove.
Thank you. Senator Duff, do you accept the yield?
Thank you, Madam President. I do. I don't think it's appropriate. The question is, does the majority, as in all of us, 25 of us in this circle, believe the same thing? I don't know that I can answer that question for every one of the members of the majority party, Madam President.
Thank you. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I didn't mean to impose a requirement that someone answers on behalf of their entire political party. Do the proponents of this bill, does the majority leader himself believe that is a reasonable rent? Since that is the actual dollar figure that you conclude if you use the requirements in the bill. Through you.
Thank you. Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. Honestly, I don't follow that line of questioning, nor do I understand the $2,000 number.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The bill suggests that affordable is defined as 80% of the area median income. And if you start looking up the area median income for various parts of the state of Connecticut, it varies a lot, obviously. In some places of the state, it's as low as maybe 60,000. But I would say for most of the state, it's 80,000. Down in Norwalk, Fairfield County, the number actually goes up significantly from there. But at 82,000, which is the state area median income, if you do the whole state, that means if you do the math, that figure is right around $2,000. It was 2004 or something like that. I mean, that would mean that this bill says that is an affordable rent. And it's important to me because I know that when we've had people come to the Housing Committee to testify about how their rent's too high, and I agree with them 100%, and they're expecting that when we pass a bill that says we're going to create affordable housing, that somehow it's going to make their housing more affordable. I would just like to have an answer from the proponents of this bill about what that number means. What is affordable? Are people's rent going to be $800?
Senator Duff.
Through you.
Thank you, Madam President. Is heat and hot water included?
Senator Sampson.
Excuse me, I didn't hear. Is what not included? Through you?
Senator Duff.
Is heat and hot water included in the rent?
Senator Sampson.
Through you, Madam President. For this figure that defines affordable, the answer is no.
Senator Duff.
How about electricity?
Senator Sampson.
I don't believe electricity is included either. This is rent only.
Senator Duff.
Well, Madam President, there are some places that have heat and hot water included, some places that have electricity and rents. They're all different. It's hard to really say, and I don't think that we can have this specific question because, as we know, and as the questioner has asked many times, there's a lot of rentals in this state that landlords can charge kind of what they want depending on what the market will bear. And so some places may have heat and hot water included, some places may have electricity included, some places may charge a garage fee. It's really hard to answer that question.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I don't disagree with the good gentleman. He's absolutely right. Landlords are charging what the market will bear. And certainly if they're able to charge $2,500 for rent in Norwalk and they're able to get a tenant, then that must be conducive with the market forces in that area, I would say. But that's not what I'm asking about at all. I'm not talking about what's happening on the street today or what apartments are available and whether they include heat and hot water or electricity. I'm asking about this bill, which says that it's going to create affordable housing. And when you say you're going to create affordable housing, the next question that an average person on the street, also me, is asking is, what's affordable? How much is that? How much is the affordable housing? Is it $800 a month? Is it $1,500 a month? Or is it $2,500 a month? Through you.
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. I think that's a very subjective question. It is one that is not answerable. There's 3.6 million people in the state of Connecticut. I'm sure that if you ask people what is affordable, they'll tell you a lot of different answers. So it's hard to answer that question.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Well, it's not really subjective when you put a proposal together suggesting you're going to create affordable housing, and then you create a policy that defines what affordable is, and you come up with the figure of 2,000 like I just did, it ceases to be subjective at that point. That is what this bill defines as affordable for the average for the state of Connecticut. It says $2,000 a month is affordable. And between you and me, I don't know that the average person that comes to the housing committee who's upset that their rent is too high is going to be happy when they hear that. Because I don't think that that's what they think. I think what they think is that they're being told that somehow some magical thing will happen with this bill that's going to make their rent unbelievably cheap. That's what I think. And I think it's unfair to present that to them in a way that's misleading when the bill itself defines what the actual median income is for an area and defines affordable as 80% of that average. The bill contains many other provisions, and since I've got the good majority leader handy, I think we should start talking about some other things that might be a little bit easier for us to discuss. Let's talk about fair rent commissions. There's a provision in this bill that is going to change the requirement for fair rent commissions in the state. This is a policy that was enacted several years ago that said that towns that have a population of 25,000 or more would be required to establish their own fair rent commissions. And of course, the bill was hastily drafted and poorly conceived and essentially allowed towns to create any mishmash of local fair rent commission that they could come up with. And some of them are very well run and very professional, and other ones are absolutely positively unprofessional and hostile, and in fact engage in unconstitutional behavior on a day-to-day basis, denying and depriving the rights of various parties in proceedings that come before them, which I've tried desperately to address and fix in the Housing Committee. But rather than fix any of those things, rather than try and make it so people get a fair hearing, whether they're a tenant or a landlord, and keep it specific to what the intent of the original bill was, what we have now is just an expansion. And in this bill proposal, what we have is a new requirement that will say that towns that have a minimum now of 15,000 population instead of 25,000. So if your town is still only 14,999, good for you that you still can go without this. But if you have 15,000 or more, you're going to have a fair rent commission. The first question I have is why? Through you, Madam President, why are we making this change? Through you.
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, just on the previous question on affordability, I just wanted to confirm we have not changed the definitions of affordable in this bill. The definitions are the definitions which have been the definitions for a long time, and there's state and federal definitions of affordable. On this question of the fair rent commissions, I believe that they have been viewed as helpful for tenants and for landlords to resolve issues, and that communities should have them. And a tenant is a tenant. A tenant is no less valuable in a community because they live in a small community versus if they live in a big city. They should have the same rights and opportunities as anybody else in the state. And so a few years ago, we changed the fair rent commissions to make it, to bring down the number of the population. In this bill, it does the same thing. However, in this bill, it also says that towns that are small, because we heard from smaller towns that said that they would have a hard time putting a fair rent commission together, that they can work with other towns on a regional basis to be able to have the fair rent commission, which I think is an appropriate compromise, especially for some of our smaller towns in the state of Connecticut. So it has worked effectively in many communities across the state. I think it'll work effectively with smaller towns. Just because it's a small town doesn't mean somehow it's not going to work. It will work, and I think it'll be a good tool for both landlord and for tenants.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
And thank you very much, Madam President. So the answer I heard was that people who live in small towns deserve the same rights as people that live in towns with more than 25,000 people. And I completely agree with that. I don't know that they deserve a fair rent commission, since I don't believe that preserves anyone's rights. But If that's true, then why, and I'm not asking for this, frankly, but why the heck wouldn't we just make it for every town? Now we're suggesting that people that live in towns that are less than 15,000 don't have that right? It seems like an inconsistent answer to me. And I guess the follow-up question about it really is, can we see any verification now that fair rent commissions have been in existence for the last several years that they have effectively lowered rents in parts of the states where fair rent commissions exist through you?
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. And Madam President, I will say that any town, even though it's 15 we're mandating, any town may have a fair rent commission. I don't, and to the gentleman's question, I don't have that data in front of me. I can say anecdotally, in my community, I know that it has been helpful to have a fair rent commission. It's been helpful, again, to landlords and to tenants, and that I believe it is a good policy to have in the state of Connecticut. I think that the reason why we have taken our time to make it smaller and then actually come up with this compromise that this could be done on a regional basis is because we've had opposition over the years, and that we have worked step by step to try and alleviate concerns and to do this incrementally. But if the good senator wants to introduce a bill with me next session in February that mandates it for all towns across the state of Connecticut, he and I can co-sponsor that bill, no problem.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate that answer, and I appreciate the consistency of the majority leader. The thing is that I believe that fair rent commissions actually impose on the rights of individuals. They certainly do not respect the right of landlords and tenants to negotiate the terms of their rent between themselves as free citizens by allowing government to interfere and determine exactly what is happening as far as rents go. I don't believe there is one shred of evidence that anyone could provide me that somehow the establishment of a fair rent commission has lowered rents or prevented evictions or, how about this, created another housing unit. And in fact, I would say that it's exactly the opposite. This is just one in a series of policies that shows the unbelievably hostile environment that housing providers are faced with in the state of Connecticut. It seems unbelievably irresponsible, even to a casual observer, that if you want to see more housing, that you shouldn't be, for lack of a better term, breaking the stones of the people that provide the housing. But that's exactly what this section of this bill does, and so do several other sections. If you wanted to see more housing in the state of Connecticut and you were really interested in increasing the supply because you see that as the problem, then you would be encouraging landlords to invest in creating new housing by developing new properties, improving old properties, converting other properties. I'm not opposed to some of the concepts that are in this bill. The idea that some properties might be able to be converted from commercial to residential, I think everyone's okay with that. The problem we have is the word that the good majority leader used a minute ago, which is mandate. You're telling towns they have to do things without asking. And you're not giving them the respect that they deserve as the people that actually live there to make the decisions on their own. That's what's wrong with this bill. It is a massive slap in the face of the people of Connecticut. That's what this bill is. It is telling every person that you don't get to determine what kind of town you live anymore. You don't get to decide you want to move to Wolcott, Connecticut, where I live, best town in Connecticut in my view, because of what Wolcott is and the way it runs itself and the way it's developed. We're not going to have that power anymore. So Wolcott's not going to look like Wolcott looks like it looks because of the people that live there that elect their officials to decide that. It's going to look like what the state of Connecticut says it should look like. And that's not good enough for free people that live as my neighbors, in my view. And that's my job, is to come up here representing them to defend their right to be able to live in a community that they design. This is a slap in the face. Fair rent commissions are an absurdity. I would love like a week-long event with anyone that wants to sit down with me and debate the veracity of the policy that is in our statute on fair rent commissions. It is garbage. It is unconstitutional. It is unfair. It is unrealistic. It is obnoxious. And it's un-American. Let's talk about hostile architecture for a minute. I thought this was like a really interesting section in the bill. I think it's section 35 of the bill that forbids municipalities from using hostile architecture. And last night, I was watching the House debate, and what was described was park benches with an armrest in the middle. Through you, Madam President, is that correct, that something like that could be considered hostile architecture? Through you.
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate that answer. I think it's kind of silly to be referring to architecture as hostile, but I get the terminology. So what is so hostile about a bench that has an armrest in the middle? Through you.
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. I think, Madam President, the issue really is working to address homelessness in the state of Connecticut, and not we've seen over the last year or two, especially since the Supreme Court's decision, really has been to criminalize homelessness, and rather than actually address the issue in communities, there has been hostile architecture to really drive the homeless away rather than actually dealing with the issue. And there have been arrests of people who are sitting on a park bench or are laying down. It's been documented. And that this is an important component of the bill for many proponents who help put this bill together.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much. Madam President, I would really love to get into the philosophical part of this, but let's ask a few questions first. Who decides what is actually hostile or not? Through you.
Senator Duff.
Thank you. Could the Senator repeat his question?
Senator Sampson.
I asked through you, who decides whether a certain piece of architecture in a town is hostile? Through you.
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. The municipality. Right.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much. Madam President, under the language in the bill, does the municipality have the final say if someone complains to a higher authority like the state of Connecticut? Through you.
Senator Duff.
Yes.
Senator Sampson.
Can you show me that in the bill through you, Madam President? Because my impression is that it is the Department of Housing that ultimately has the final say, according to the language in the bill. Through you.
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. Senator Dems.
The Senate will stand at ease.
The Senator to Section 26, subsection C. Line number 1845.
Senator Sampson.
Through you, Madam President, thank you very much. I appreciate that citation in the bill. The gentleman is correct. I must have been thinking about a previous version that we saw in the Housing Committee. I think did allow the override to exist beyond that. But that doesn't change the fact that now you have a governmental authority determining whether or not a certain piece of architecture could be hostile. And I'm confused about what the goal here is. Is the goal to allow homeless people to be allowed to sleep on park benches on a town green, for example, through you?
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. The answer would be yes.
Senator Sampson.
I appreciate that, Madam President. And maybe this is just a difference of opinion or a a lack of understanding. I'm just curious to know why that would be considered a good idea or a positive move in the right direction. I do understand the gentleman's earlier comments about trying to remove any stigma from being homeless or something like that, but it seems to me that benches that are on town greens or near playgrounds, for example, are places that are not intended for homeless people to sleep. They're intended for people that live in the community to be able to sit and enjoy the park or the playground. Am I wrong about that? Through you.
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. I would just argue that if we built more housing, we'd have fewer homeless people.
Senator Sampson.
Through you, Madam President, can the addition of a hostile architecture provision in this bill, can you explain to me exactly how that builds one more piece of housing? Through you.
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. This section is one section of many, as the Senator has said, that the goal is for housing growth, and that's the aim of the bill, so that while, again, homelessness is an issue across Connecticut and across our nation, we were very close many years ago to, especially in Fairfield County, to eliminating homelessness. But we have slid backwards a little bit, as have many others, and we also, with the recent Supreme Court decision, don't want to criminalize homelessness. We want to solve homelessness, and we have to take many different steps in order to do that. But we also need to build housing, not criminalize homelessness. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The topic of homelessness is something that could also go on for quite some time. I'm trying to be respectful of the fact that there are many folks that want to speak on this bill, and we've already been here since this morning debating other alleged emergency bills. I don't know that the subject of armrests in park benches qualifies as an emergency for most people in Connecticut. Certainly not me, but I think that we can move on to the next section, which is also not an emergency, which happens to do with the authorization of the Department of Housing to fund a pilot program, which I found an interesting term of art. But they're going to fund trucks that will be modified to provide, I'm looking for the language in the bill, but basically it's a housing and shower trucks, I guess they would be described as. And I'm just curious, what do we know about these? How much has been appropriated for this? How much is it going to cost per person that receives these services? Is this a good use of taxpayer money? Through you.
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. I would assume that if you're homeless, you would assume that, again, I can't speak for everybody in the state of Connecticut who may be experiencing the emergency of homelessness or who are unhoused in our state, but I would certainly think that they would appreciate the fact that we do view this bill as an emergency bill because we want them off the street and into safe housing. So again, the premise is, while you may not agree with the hostile architecture, people who are unhoused are in an emergency and they need housing, which is why we're doing this bill right now. So I want to lay that out as a foundation. On the issue of the showers, the mobile showers and laundry pilot, it's a pilot program that is supposed to be undertaken by the Department of Housing. The money is in the budget that we passed back in June. It is still in the budget, and the Department of Housing has to come up with a plan and a protocol. I think they have to have 3 towns that take part in it, and looking forward to that program actually starting once the governor signs this bill.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I really do appreciate the Majority Leader and the way he frames his responses with such vigor, except for the fact that, this doesn't provide housing for homelessness. It doesn't. It's a truck that has a shower in it, and maybe that's a good thing, but that's not solving a problem. If you want to solve the problem of homelessness, you really should find out more about why people are homeless. I've investigated the subject of homelessness in some significant depth. And I'll tell you that the majority reason for people to be homeless is not because they don't have access to a home. It's mostly because of mental illness. In fact, I know somebody who works in this arena, and they try and put people up in hotel rooms and things like that. They leave. They leave. They don't want to stay in a home. So I will also point out that the state of Connecticut actually has a remarkably small number of homeless people. I'm not suggesting it's not a problem. I am with the good senator on solving the problem. But this bill has been presented to us as an emergency, and the policy is going to solve our problems. Back in the end of session, the good chairman of the housing committee told me that this is going to solve our housing crisis. It's going to make rents lower. And when I asked those questions over and over, I couldn't get an answer. And today, while the good senator, I think, did a better job of answering my questions, I still have not gotten to how we're solving anything. I don't know how we're driving down the cost of housing when we don't have a shortage. You can build more housing, sure, and you can force more housing to be built through this policy. No doubt about it. And if you start giving people taxpayer money to put up buildings, they're gonna use the taxpayer money to put up buildings. But that doesn't mean that suddenly housing's gonna become more affordable. I don't think it is. I think at the end of the day, all you're doing is wasting taxpayer money, and what you ought to be doing is finding a way to make the state of Connecticut more affordable for people to live. And maybe you can't fix everything like how much rent is, but I'll tell you, if property taxes were lower, then rents would be lower. If there were less mandates on towns to do things, there might be lower property taxes. If there was less policy causing the rise of electricity in the state of Connecticut, then industries that use electricity to produce goods and services could charge less for their products. That's the kind of thing that we actually have the ability to do here. We don't have a housing shortage. We don't have a massive people that are outside homeless because they can't find a place to live in Connecticut. That's just not happening. People are not homeless because there's no rents available. I mean, if that was true, then we would talk about that as an emergency, but that's just not happening. We have a few thousand maximum homeless people in the summer in the state of Connecticut. And I certainly care about them as much as anybody else in this room. And I'd like to find them help any way I can. But this bill's not going to fix that problem. And it's not going to fix the problem of the people that come before the housing committee upset at the fact that their rent is too much. The only thing we can do to help those people is find ways to create a cheaper Connecticut, a more affordable Connecticut, via the recommendations I've already made. How about less policies that are harming industry? How about less regulations and requirements on small businesses so they can actually pay their employees more? How about making it so that products end up costing less because they don't have to go through such burdensome regulations to get from wherever they go to be on a shelf in Connecticut? These are things that we can actually do. This policy is nothing more than replacing the time-honored tradition of home rule that we have in the state of Connecticut that defines us, that allows people in their own communities to decide what their neighborhood looks like, what their town green looks like, what their town looks like overall, and replaces that with a bureaucracy that actually isn't even a bureaucracy. It is a very, very small number of people. Earlier today, we passed a bill that effectively is going to give 3 people complete and utter control over $500 million. This bill, I don't know how much this bill costs. I can only imagine everything that's in here that is being created and the cost that it is going to filter down to the taxpayers in the state of Connecticut. But I'll tell you, every one of those costs, whatever they are, is going to make rents less affordable, not more affordable. And that, friends, is the problem, that there is just too much government. I have one more thing that I failed to address before trying to wrap up on this bill, and I just can't let this go without talking about it, because this is something extremely near and dear to me. And that is the sections of the bill that cap the amount of security deposits. I don't know who I'm addressing, but I would like an answer to why the need for this policy at this juncture and why it's an emergency. Through you.
Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. If the senator can mention the section, because I believe that whatever the law is, and we're not making any changes to the law.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. False alarm. It was in a previous version of the bill. It's not in this one. So that's good news. This is what happens, friends and neighbors, when you are reviewing a bill that was handed to you yesterday that's 104 pages. At any rate, I think I laid out most of my concerns. We all have a vote in this circle. It's sad that I think that most of the time the votes that we take are predetermined. You know, pretty much everyone knows how they're going to vote on most things before they actually come out here. And I'm quite certain the majority is skilled at counting their votes, and they know that they have the numbers necessary to pass this. And I know there are a few other speakers, and I encourage them, if they are in opposition to this bill, to give it every last ounce of their ability to try and change as many minds as possible, although it's probably fruitless, and we're going to be stuck with this policy. But I would encourage the people of Connecticut to pay close attention to this one and what happens in their own communities. I want people to pay attention. Tell me I'm wrong, picket my house. Like I said, if it turns out that rents go down and I'm all wet. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is the government's going to grow larger, and things are going to get more expensive, and your taxes are going to go up. And that's going to continue until somebody puts the brakes on this train. I'm doing my best. Thank you, Madam President.